This drink might help support your arteries in ways most people misunderstand, not because it cleans anything in a mechanical sense, but because it may subtly influence how your body handles stress, inflammation, and long-term biological wear. And that distinction is where most of the confusion about heart health begins. Because when people hear the phrase, clean your arteries, they imagine something physical being removed, something scraped away, something reversed, like pipes being flushed. But the human body does not operate like plumbing. It is not a system of static tubes. It is a living network of responsive tissue that constantly adapts to the environment it exists in. Your arteries are not passive channels. They are active, sensing structures. The inner lining, known as the endothelium, is constantly measuring conditions inside your bloodstream. It responds to pressure changes. It responds to nutrient levels. It responds to stress hormones circulating through your system. Even subtle shifts in your daily routine can influence how this lining behaves. Whether your body is in a calm state or a constant low-level alert state changes the signals being sent through these vessels every second of the day. And this is where the idea of cleaning becomes misleading, because nothing is being scrubbed or flushed in a literal sense. Instead, what changes over time is responsiveness, flexibility, the ability of blood vessels to expand, contract, and regulate flow smoothly. When the system is balanced, this happens almost invisibly. When it is under repeated stress, the regulation becomes less efficient, not broken, not blocked, just slightly altered in how it reacts. People often assume this shift comes from one major cause, one food, one habit, one nutrient. But when you actually look at how biological systems behave, it rarely works that way. The body responds to patterns, repetition, accumulation of signals over time. Modern life is built on repetition of a very specific kind: constant food availability, frequent stimulation, irregular sleep cycles, persistent psychological stress that never fully resolves. None of these feel extreme on their own, but together they create a baseline environment that the body has to continuously adapt to. And adaptation is not free. Every adaptation requires resources, energy, biochemical adjustment, regulatory recalibration. Over time, this constant adaptation can shift how systems behave at rest. The cardiovascular system is especially sensitive to this because it is directly tied to both physical and emotional regulation. Heart rate, vessel tone, blood flow, all of these are influenced not just by physical activity, but by nervous system state. Which means your arteries are not only responding to what you consume, but also how you experience the world. This is where beverages and foods enter the conversation in a more realistic way. Not as fixes, not as cleansers, but as modulators of existing biological pathways. Certain natural compounds found in plant-based drinks have been studied for their interaction with oxidative processes and signaling pathways in the body. Oxidative stress itself is not inherently harmful. It is a normal part of metabolism. But when the balance between oxidative activity and the body's regulatory systems shifts over long periods, it can influence how cells behave under stress. What some of these compounds appear to do is not remove damage, but influence how the body responds to it. They interact with signaling pathways involved in inflammation. They may influence how blood vessels regulate relaxation and contraction. They may support nitric oxide activity, which plays a role in vascular flexibility. But even here, the key idea is not correction, it is modulation. Small shifts in how systems respond, not reversal of what has already occurred. This is important because it reframes the entire concept of artery health. Instead of thinking in terms of cleaning or clogging, it becomes more accurate to think in terms of responsiveness over time. A healthy vascular system is not one that is free of all change. It is one that can adapt smoothly to changing conditions. It maintains flexibility under stress. It recovers efficiently after activation. It returns to baseline without excessive strain. And baseline itself is not fixed. It is shaped by environment. The modern environment is uniquely demanding on this system because it removes many of the natural rhythms that once structured biological regulation. Eating is no longer tied to scarcity or timing. Stress is no longer episodic, it is continuous. Sleep is often fragmented. Even recovery is interrupted by constant cognitive stimulation. This creates a situation where the nervous system remains partially activated for extended periods. When the nervous system is in this state, vascular tone is also affected. Blood vessels respond to sympathetic activation. They constrict or relax based on perceived threat or safety signals. This means emotional and psychological states are not separate from vascular health. They are directly connected. A prolonged state of subtle stress can influence how blood vessels behave even in the absence of physical exertion. Now, when people search for a drink that cleans arteries, what they are often responding to is not a literal belief in physical cleansing. It is a recognition that something feels off internally. Energy levels fluctuate. Recovery feels slower. There is a sense of reduced resilience that is difficult to define. And in that search, the idea of a natural intervention becomes appealing because it suggests simplicity in a system that feels increasingly complex. But the reality is that the body does not respond to isolated inputs in isolation. It responds to context. A compound that interacts positively with one pathway may have a different effect depending on the state of the system receiving it. This is why identical diets can produce different outcomes in different individuals. Not because the foods themselves change, but because the internal environment they enter is not the same. The gut plays a role here as well, because what you absorb into your bloodstream is influenced by digestive function, and digestive function is influenced by stress, rhythm, and microbial balance. When digestion is stable, the body processes nutrients in a more predictable way. When it is disrupted, the pattern of absorption and signaling changes. This can indirectly affect vascular function because metabolites entering circulation influence inflammatory and metabolic pathways. Even the brain is involved in this network, because perception of stress is not just psychological, it is biochemical. Stress hormones influence cardiovascular tone. Cognitive load influences nervous system balance. The experience of constant mental processing can keep the body in a state of low-level activation that affects multiple systems simultaneously. So when all of these layers are considered together, the idea of a single drink cleaning arteries becomes too simplistic. But the idea that certain dietary patterns may support the body's ability to maintain balance becomes more accurate. It is not about reversal. It is about support within an existing system that is constantly adapting. And perhaps the most important part of this is understanding that adaptation itself is not failure. It is the core feature of biology. The body is always adjusting to its environment. The question is not whether it adapts, but what it is adapting to, and whether that environment allows for stability or requires constant recalibration. In that sense, the state of your arteries is not separate from the rest of your life. It is an integrated reflection of how your body has been responding over time, to food, to stress, to sleep, to rhythm, to environment. And any intervention, whether dietary or behavioral, exists within that larger context, not as a reset button, but as one of many signals the body interprets while trying to maintain equilibrium. And maybe that is where the misunderstanding begins, not in thinking that the body can improve, but in thinking that improvement happens through isolation, when in reality it happens through interaction, through patterns, through time, and through the quiet way the body continues to negotiate between stress and stability every single day without